they have every right to actually be the coconut head generation. Like, don't listen, don't agree to what does not work for you, and keep making demands. When they tell you cannot change the system, you say, which system can't we change? Yeah. This system is for us, so we ought to change that system. And I think that's the message for every young person listening.
This season of the Unamplified podcast is supported by the Open Society Foundations.
Are we built for this moment? This is not a question about bravery or courage, because we're not in shortage of brave activists, citizens taking courageous action. But it's an important question to ask, especially with the global and regional trends. With the threat to democracy, we're all experiencing democratic recession, and we're seeing a lot more governments becoming hostile to civil society organization and to civic action, and even to citizens demanding for basic rights and freedoms. With the evolution in the information space, we can also throw in artificial intelligence into that, because for good or bad, we have a lot on our hands. And so the question that we seek to answer in this episode is, are we built for this moment? Do we have the requisite resilience to move beyond the threats? Welcome to the Unamplified podcast. My name is Cynthia Mbamalu, your host, and with me today is my co-host.
Hi everyone, it's Queen Siwa here, and on this episode, we are unmuting Africa loud and unfiltered. Joining us here is Dr. Matthew Ayubakuro. He's a seasoned development professional and a social legal researcher. Welcome to the Unamplified podcast, Dr. Matthew.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
I feel a pressure to raise the tone of my voice because I usually don't have this, but the energy is amazing.
Thank you. You can use your voice. You know me, I have street voice. This one has studio voice.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's very. I'm very glad we finally get to host you, and we're discussing a very important topic. Are we built for this moment? You know, when I was giving the context, highlighted the trends when it comes to threat to democratic rights and practice on the continent, not just, I think, globally and within the region. We're also seeing that while we're having an evolution in information space, you have more government looking for ways to monitor the digital communication. And so, yes, on one hand, there is a lot more citizen participation in the digital space, but there's also that threat that your rights could be restricted or limited there. And so within this context, do you think we're built for this moment to withstand and build better resilience in this moment?
Unequivocally, yes, I think we are.
Okay.
When you reached out to me about this podcast, I had spent the last 2 weeks or so following events in India where young people have come together and formed a caricature cockroach junta party.
Ooh.
And they have, for the first time in the current Indian Prime Minister's history, gotten a minister to resign.
Okay.
The education minister to resign. And people thought that was never possible because the current Prime Minister of India, he's never really admitted any wrong during the time he's been in office. He's been very strategic. He's a strong leader, as we have in most parts of the world now. So for young people to organize in the way they did and got their main demand, which is the resignation of the Minister of Education, I have no doubt that young people are built for this moment. And maybe in the course of the podcast, we're going to talk around a lot of other examples. But in the context of shrinking civic space and all these challenges, young people have shown that the more you raise the stakes, they will also raise their own stakes, and they are built for this moment. I think whether they're able to leverage the moment as much as they should is in question. In some cases, we have successes. In some cases, they've gone halfway and walked back, but there is no doubt that they've shown that they are built for this moment.
Are you built for this moment?
Well, when he said that we are built for this moment, and with the example of the young people in India, pushing for change and making it possible for the education minister to resign. I was just putting it in Nigerian context. I don't think we've gotten to that moment yet, because yes, there are so many changes in the civic space where we've seen young people, like you said, in India, in Kenya, but still there's this thing that we are lacking. I think is this the need of individualism, where people just think that as long as this matter is not directed at them, they will not come out, they will not talk. But I think there's a need for us to know that we need to come together. We need to be in solidarity. We need to come together, even if that matter is not directed at you. Tomorrow it might be for you. It might come to your doorstep and you won't be able to pack it alone this time. So I think we've not gotten to that moment yet.
You don't think we're totally built for the moment we're in? No. Okay. I think one where I feel like we are, another where I feel like there's a lot more building that needs to happen. But when you talked about the example in India, I was just thinking about, there've been several of these trends we're seeing in countries now. Young people turning out in their numbers and making demands. You had conversations that were happening in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh some years ago. You had Madagascar. You had, Kenya is the most recent on the continent, close to us here. And in my mind, I'm also wondering if the traditional civil society space, if we're building in a way to ensure we're building bridges across, civil society organizing, young people organizing in the street. Because for me, that is what makes it stronger for us to engage. But I love the positivity you started with. And so I'll bring this next question on the civic space. We talked about the shrinking civic space. I want to get your opinion. What do you think is the state of the civic space in Africa now, on the continent? Be real with us. No diplomatic answer. What is the state of our civic space?
No, I will be real because this is a space to be real. And for once, I don't get to be this real in my day job. So I'm really going to leverage the opportunity to be real here.
Okay.
I do think that we need to look at the state of civic space in terms of the perception of it and the reality of it.
Okay.
I do think that one of the most important ways governments have been able to restrict young people from being activists or engaging is the perception they create around civic space. Right. So I remember when I was younger, whenever I wanted to go for a protest, my mom would call me and she would tell me, remember, they killed somebody. People are going to die. It's not worth your life.
Yes.
And as I grew older, I started asking, actually, let's look at the data. How many people have died since we returned to democracy in 1999 because they went out to protest? You're going to pick NSAS out of that because NSAS was a moment that was really sad and unfortunate. But the probability that I'm going to die from a protest or speaking up in Nigeria is much lower than the probability that I might actually lose my life traveling from Abuja to Port Harcourt. I'm more likely to die in Nigeria traveling from Abuja to Port Harcourt than I am raising my voice to seek accountability in Nigeria.
True.
We do understand that every government, and it's almost a usual thing with governments now, unfortunately, will try to restrict rights, freedoms, I believe, for people just because they want to keep their hold on power.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you think about how, we had a protest in Abuja that just happened. People didn't even know it had happened, right?
Yes.
It just passed. And we had the End Bad Governance protest. We had protests. You talked about the Kenyan one where they brought a whole city to a standstill.
Yes.
There are events that happen that make us feel, well, maybe the government has been overhanded. But we do have rights that we enjoy, especially in the context of Nigeria. And most other countries on the continent that just 2-3 decades ago, our parents did not have, our grandparents did not have. So I do worry. And I think in the National Assembly in Nigeria, we just had a law introduced a couple of weeks ago to start regulating civil society funding. We do have these issues. But if you do recall, even in that context, this is the third attempt in Nigeria's National Assembly, the 10th Assembly, to restrict this space. And civil society has stood up and said this can. In the last time, the speaker reversed himself within a couple of hours. So these attempts are there. But I do think while the state space is being restricted, I think citizens and civil society still have demonstrated an ability to take a stand. And in most cases, they've been successful. And so I think the question we should be asking ourselves is how we leverage it rather than the fear and the perception that you actually can't do anything.
How we leverage it rather than, and when you gave the example about the attempts to use legislation to restrict civil society organizations operations or to even restrict fundamental rights and freedom, it just made me smile because that was a product of, the withdrawal of those bills was a product of civil society pushing engagement, demands and pushing back. And so if we are alert and vigilant to ensure we keep watching that space, and it's easier for us to organize and push back. I know there was something Quincy where I talked about individualism, where most times there's also that tendency for a lot of people to say, oh, it's not about me, it's about them. So we're not interested in that. Or something happened in this state. Rather than supporting the people in that state to amplify the issues, most are like, oh, it's not about me, or this sector is not my sector. And perhaps one of the things when you talked about opportunities, we need to start leveraging is how do we amplify each other's voices? How do we ensure we're not acting in silos, but we're working together, because it's easier to bring a city or to put a city on hold when we turn out together. Quincy, why?
Yeah. So, when we were discussing, when Cynthia was asking the first question, she made mention of loss of hope and cynicism in her questions. It made me to think about young Africans. You started your activity at a young age. I mean, with Students' Union and all that. And even the EndSARS, as you mentioned. What has actually worked that young people can learn from, especially when the pressure intensifies?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to when I was a student union, it seems like ages ago now. I feel really old thinking about that.
How old are you?
On those
you say you feel really old.
I feel
you're still a millennial.
It seems a long time ago. But what has worked? I think there are two things at the top of my mind in terms of what has worked. The first thing is that every movement, activist engagement I've been involved in have been very dependent on the leadership of that movement. What you find a lot of young people across the continent right now, and actually elsewhere in the world, is that young people are angry, they are dissatisfied with systems, they have grievances they want to express, but they are struggling to find a conduit through which to express it. And so if they don't find that right conduit, the pressure just builds up for a very long time. And then if there is no way to express it, it either blows up, in which case you get violence and things like that, or it dissipates and everybody just goes back home. And it takes somebody to kind of bridge that barrier. And you see it even in practical terms. I've been part of protests where we're confronting the police. The police was on one side, we on the other side. We're all shouting, carrying placards. Seems like nothing is happening. And then some mad person just decided, you know what? I'm going to bridge this police barrier. When that person jumps on the police barrier, everything goes to shit.
Yes.
And then that is when the protest really starts. And I do think what always works with activism and civil action is having a leadership. It could be a person or a group of people who decide that, okay, we are going to provide the route through which people are going to express their feelings. In the case of India, I mentioned, while students were very angry about what had caused this issue with the government leaking exam papers and therefore making them rewrite exams and people committed suicides, they didn't really protest until a Supreme Court justice decided to call them cockroaches. That most of the young people. And then somebody who was not even in India, he was abroad studying, decided, you know what? If you're going to call out cockroaches, I'm going to form a cockroach junta party. And then he created a website, created a logo, and then the memes started. And he provided expression for all this anger. And then people who were in the country started a protest. So the first thing is there needs to be some bit of leadership. And in most cases, we try to engineer leadership, which is really good when you're being strategic. But in the context of anger, it just takes one or two people to say, okay, we are going to be the ones who will be the figureheads of this. That is the first thing. The second thing that has worked, which regrettably is missing a lot in a lot of protest movements, is follow through. How long are you going to keep this going?
Yeah.
And it's totally understandable. I mean, when EndSARS happened, most of us had problems in our workplaces because we had to choose between going to work in the morning or getting on the protest line.
Yeah.
And I had friends who were lawyers who closed down their chambers for the period of the EndSARS, and that cost them a lot of money. And so whenever, I mean, I haven't been part of one for a while now, maybe for a few years, but whenever I'm part of any sort of movement or protest process, the moment it starts, my brain just shifts back to how are we going to keep this going? And in EndSARS, what we did the moment it started was, in my state, we decided we need to get a group of people who would meet every evening. So we could be like 20,000 people on the streets in the day. At 7 p.m., about 8-9 of us, we go to one of my friend's office, we sit down, we plan the next day's protest, who's going to bring the music, who's going to bring the food, who's going to bring all this other stuff. The other 20,000 people have gone home, they are sleeping. But
that's how it is, no?
We have to sit back and plan for the next day. So when they show up the next day, there's food, there's music, there's a vehicle to carry the speakers, and then everybody joins in. The moment we're done, we reconverge. Unfortunately, one of those evenings was when we heard what has happened in Lekki Tollgate, and everybody just kind of lost it. But the point is, you have to be sure that there's some bit of leadership, and you have to be sure that there's a plan for follow through. And it is the protests that have had these plans to follow through and clear-cut leadership that have outlasted the ones who've just sprung up, demonstrated grievance, and then just gone home.
Yeah, when he said leadership, you need to have a sense of leadership. Follow through. And that is it's very important because so recently there's been a lot of conversations around how do young people translate the power from the street to influencing electoral outcomes. Yeah. And then most times you have very critical moments where you have, there's that moment where young people are ready to demand change and engage. But that usually it's like you get to a peak and then everyone is wondering, okay, what next? Yeah. You've made the statement, you've gotten the government to respond to maybe some of the ideas or some of the demands. However, when it comes to the contest at the polls, you don't see that translating into outcomes. And so you're back to that circle because you have a new set of government elected and then you're going back to engage on those things. So it's almost like you're starting again. So we're not building bridges from the street to the political offices. We're focusing on one part and leaving the other part. The Gen Z protests in Kenya, for instance, and I think even during the EndSARS, some people had this notion that there's no leadership. We don't need leadership. It's organic. We don't need any of those things. And you meet a lot of Gen Zs also telling you like, when it comes to protests, we don't need leadership. We don't want any of those things. And I want to throw a follow-up question to that. What would be your advice when it comes to strategy, especially because we're organizing within uncertain times? Mm-hmm. And so the success story from India, for instance, there needed to be some level of organizing happening for the movement to be sustained to where it got to. And I'm wondering what would be that message to the younger people listening on building effectively to sustain your action beyond the people who initiated it?
Serious question. I'm always kind of slow to give what would seem to be straitjacket solutions to problems like this.
Sure.
Because human nature, the complexity of countries like Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, it's just so much that the ability to just say this would work in every context is difficult. But the first thing is about diagnosing why this situation happens the way it does. And the Nigerian context, it's built on a society that is really bereft of trust. And people think that young people just don't trust government or they don't trust the National Assembly or the president. Actually, we are a society that just don't trust anything, right? I mean, there are societies where if I met somebody on the street and the person wanted to sell me this cup, I'd be like, how much is this? I'll sell it. In Nigeria, if you want to sell me this cup on the street, I'm wondering, why are you on the street? Why don't you have a store? Is this a real cup? Is it broken? Why are you selling me at such a high price? Maybe you're trying to get money off me. If the price is low, I'm going to think, why is the price so low? Maybe it's fake. So in that kind of society, it's now absolutely illogical for you to expect that once we start a protest and somebody says, you know what, I will lead it. People are like, okay, yeah, lead us. It's fine. They'll be like, no, what are you getting out of this? We want to understand it. You're going to betray us. The last time we did a protest, you betrayed us. Davido, you went and met with IG and had a closed door meeting.
Closed door meeting, true. It's true. They came
so the next time a celebrity comes up and says, I'm going to speak for you, people are going to think, yeah, no, we don't want leaders. We just want to scatter everything and go home, essentially. So we need to understand that this is a society that is really low on trust. And when you have a society like that, just throwing in solutions that do not understand this lack of trust becomes a problem. So then the question becomes, how do you build trust within such a movement? I mean, in EndSARS, what we did in my state, and it's different from what happened everywhere else, is when we got to almost the peak of the protest and the government said, okay, bring your leaders who want to meet with you. We said, because we know lack of trust, we said, no, we don't want to come and meet with you as leaders. You come and meet us in front of everybody. And there was a lot of back and forth in this negotiation. We're in front of government house for 3 to 4 hours negotiating on this issue of we picking leaders to go in and meet with the government. We said, no, we don't. And at the end of the day, the governor came out with his team to the gate. And we had one of these crazy vans. We told him to climb the van. Everybody could see him. Then we decided to then make our presentation to him in front of everybody. So I think you need to create the leadership in ways that takes into cognizance how you can bridge this lack of trust by being transparent, by reporting back, by being accountable. Once you start building that up, then you can then find leaders who the followers can say, actually, this person has been really open to me, and I can go back on my learned lack of trust and then try to follow this leader.
A follow-up question of what Cynthia said. We have young people who want democracy, but then again, they don't have trust in the democracy.
Yeah.
And also, we've seen that the evolution of digital activism. And on the other hand, we've seen threats from government on the freedom of internet.
Yeah.
So how do young people build power? How can they build power with this whole threat that they are facing in as much as they want democracy, they want to participate, but there's this constraint from government? How do they express their power?
Okay. I mean, I don't think I have the legitimacy to speak for young people, essentially.
True.
But
maybe from your experience, maybe.
Yeah, but the feeling I have is that young people have built their strategy of engagement in democracy a lot on perception. Like a lot of them have built it on assumptions.
True.
And I do think, I mean, we're here, I'm talking to Cynthia, who was part of Not Too Young to Run movement. Before the Not Too Young to Run movement succeeded in getting that constitutional amendment through, I don't think anybody would have believed that young people can build a movement that will change Nigeria's constitution.
True.
You know, but then by working with people in parliament, by working with other society partners, by working with people who had their legs in the door already, including those on the street, were able to build it. I do think that one of the main things that is a bit disheartening for me when I think of Nigeria's democracy and Nigeria's trajectory as a country is I've seen young people break barriers in music. I've seen them break barriers in movies. I've seen them break barriers in business. I've seen them break barriers in education where they've decided not to go with the grain and they've decided to build their own stuff, right? And just not agreeing to live by the restrictions that a society has provided them. And democracy is the one place where they accept those realities. And because I work on democracy in my day-to-day job, I can see how these perceptions, keeping young people down, is almost reiterating systems that should not really have a place in a society like Nigeria. And I really hope, I'm not going to try to be a motivational speaker because I am not. I'm actually quite depressive when I speak to young people. But the one thing I can say to young people is, just as you've broken barriers everywhere, don't accept the norm when it comes to democracy. Because ultimately, and this is so cliche to say this, but ultimately, me and Cynthia, our generation is also passing away. Like the people who would change this country is them, right? And some of them would find ways and leave the country. We're going to probably talk about that at some other point. But I do think that the one thing I would like to see young people do is not to accept the norm. Don't accept that it is not possible. Don't accept that you can't change the outcome of democratic processes. And in a way, once they start getting one or two wins, that will then energize other people to actually get other wins as well. And we just need a few wins to change the tide of democracy for young people.
Yeah, you know, when you said don't accept that you can't change. You see, I'm just even impressed because normally you're quite pessimistic when we're having conversations.
I don't know what's happening to me
today. You're very optimistic on this episode, and I'm like, I'm loving the new Matthew I'm seeing.
Well,
but you know,
wait till tomorrow morning.
Okay, it may change. But I think maybe you went for a meeting and then you saw some indicators and he told you that maybe there is some hope. But I really love the optimism and that charge to young people because, you know, I think during EndSARS, the term coconut head generation became quite popular, especially for Gen Z, you know. And I love that because if there's something the Gen Zs do not have is a lot of them never had any experience of military dictatorship. So that fear, you know, the thing some of our parents have, like when you said your mom would say, don't go for that protest. Did you hear? I know my own parents, oh my gosh, when I started, they didn't even help that I'm a woman. They'll be like, you don't know what happens to young women that join protest. But you know, because they still had the fear of the era of the military dictatorship, right? For those of us that are millennials, you're raised by parents that had that fear. So somehow there is a generational transfer of that trauma. And so we are living with that kind of trauma. I mean, I think the term born free was more popularized from South Africa, those that were born post-apartheid. But I would almost adopt that term to say most of the Gen Zs were born in an era where the memory of military dictatorship was a bit far away. So they have every right to actually be the coconut head generation. Like, don't listen, don't agree to what does not work for you, and keep making demands. When they tell you cannot change a system, you say, which system can't we change? Yeah. This system is for us, so we ought to change that system. And I think that's the message for every young person listening. It could get worse, but imagine if we don't take action. So it's better you take action and prevent anything getting worse than to be told that you can't operate. And so this brings me to the other question I wanted to ask, and is with respect to the fear factor. Because despite the fact that we say a lot of the younger people do not have the passed down generational trauma from military dictatorship or authoritarian leaders that were really oppressive in maybe not all countries in Africa, but most of our countries now. Civic's data from 2025 highlights that the civic space in most of our countries on African continent or in the continent is either repressed or closed. Yeah. There are a lot more reports around journalists arrested and detained, not just at the cap, like, at the state level and different countries. Even civil society activists. Earlier in the year, one of our partners in Uganda, Uganda went to elections, was arrested, and she was released after the election. And we have more reports of activists within different countries arrested and detained. And so, for some reason, this has enabled that fear factor to become part of the conversation. So what's your reflection around managing the risk when it comes to engaging? What's that cost for engaging in the civic space? And then how do we prevent that loss of hope and cynicism to become the norm?
So the one thing we need to get out of the way is that some people are just born brave, some are not.
Okay, some people are born brave, some are not.
Some are not.
This is a quote I'm taking.
Well, it's not really a quote, but I'm just saying. So for me, for instance, personally, I just don't have the ability to be scared in those kind of contexts. Like, it just doesn't get in my head.
You were very active in student, and I heard your story then. It was in River State. What's that your name? In River State University. Oh, no.
Don't bring that up, Cynthia.
No. I've heard your story from student activism days and enter. So I know
when I was student union president, for instance, when we wanted to lead a protest against the state government, people would mobilize 1,000 students to lead protests. Me, I took 14 students and I put them in a vehicle and we drove to the gate of the
14 students.
14, and we use the bus and we block the gate and we say it's we, and that whatever is going to happen today. And even when they sent like 40 something policemen, we didn't get in the bus. We fought back until they subdued us. Story for another day. But the point I'm making is,
I've been hearing about
some people just have the ability to be brave.
True.
And some don't. And we cannot engineer bravery. And if you go through the history of a lot of countries, it's just taking people who've decided to say, okay, I will be that person. I will take that stand. True. And then others would follow. The expectation that we can suddenly talk people into bravery is faulty. We just can't. That's the first thing. The second thing, and which I do advise young people everywhere to try to do, is to inform your fear with facts. Right?
Inform your
Don't
fear
just
with facts.
Be scared for the sake of it. And I've already given an example. Go online and ask yourself, in the last 10 years, how many young people have died from taking a stand?
True.
How many have been imprisoned? How long were they imprisoned? I do think that the moment you start peeling off the data behind these perceptions, then you start saying, look, actually, it's not as bad as it seems. That's the second thing, informing with facts. The third thing, and it's something you referred to already, is to build community, right? When I was doing activism long time ago, I always had, and then phones had speed dials. We don't have them now anymore. Where you had like number one for this person, number two for that person. I had a speed dial for a lawyer. I had a speed dial for my contacts in the police. I had a speed dial for my contacts in the DSS. I had a speed dial for somebody in the hospital. I had a speed dial for my media person. Like, these 5 were my first speed dial. So whenever we're heading to a protest venue, I'm calling my media person to say, we're going to this person, this place, we don't know what's going to happen. I just want you to know. So when we led protests that went really bad, within 5-10 minutes of the situation going bad, there was media there. And once there's media there, you can't hide things anymore. Somebody's going to capture it and do something about it. If we got arrested, I'd already informed my lawyer. So within minutes of anybody getting arrested, there's going to be a lawyer appearing at the police station to say, my client is here.
True.
If you're not going to charge him, let him go. If you're going to keep him for 40, within 48 hours, you have to get him out. If people got injured and have been involved in protests like that, we have somebody on dial that we can take straight to the hospital or would come and meet us there to deal with that. So the third and important thing is you have to be organized and build a community around your protest. If you decide to be Malala, who went and stood in front of a building, a government building, and was protesting and going back every day, she's in like first world country. She's in a country where people respect rule of law. You are in Nigeria or you're in Ghana. Like, you have to know the size of your coat.
Yes,
so
true.
You have to build that community so that whenever anything happens, and please do not take for granted the fact that people will support you if you stand for what is right.
Yeah.
And in Nigeria, what we've seen in Kenya, I've seen too many examples where you thought people will not take a stand, but they will.
They
and in most cases, they're just looking for somebody to break that barrier. And I mean, people don't like mentioning his name, but the example that keeps sticking to my mind in Nigeria is Very Dark Man.
Okay.
When he started, people just didn't take this man serious.
True.
You know, but then he's probably gotten some things right or others wrong. But whenever he's taking a stand that people can interpret as something that is just, society has just backed him up. And even celebrities who don't engage in government issues make donations to him because of the stance that he takes. But he's an exceptional example. I'm just saying that this society, these young people whom you don't know, they will stand for you as long as you build that community. And just don't let the perception of fear stop you from acting.
Yeah, don't let the perception of fear stop you. You know, when you talked about building community, the examples on those you have on your speed dial, you did not mention, you didn't have a girlfriend in school then.
No,
to tell her that, maybe they don't arrest me. Oh.
No, I didn't.
They don't arrest me.
Well, but no guy wants his girlfriend to come and see him in police station.
I thought that would increase your street cred. Like, finally, for one time, activists arrested, you know, all of those stuff.
Did you find that attractive in guys in school?
So I was part of the activism.
Okay,
so it was people like us, they were not really dating us because they're like, this one carrying backsack up and down, doing activism up and down. She will not know, she will not understand romance. So, you know, but you know, it's talked about how you have people on speed dial. And I remember that incident in 2011, we were observing the elections in Plateau State. And then we were picked up by the DSS for no reason. I mean, that election, you know, if you remember, that was the election for former President Goodluck Jonathan. You know, that election was very, you know, quite contentious and controversial. In fact, Plateau State had a lot of incidents of violence. And so, but the moment when we realized they were taking us to the DSS office, one of us just sent a message to, you know, our other partners, like, we've just been picked up, and then a post on Facebook. Then Facebook was actually, I think Facebook was very more popular than Twitter at that time, at 2011. And immediately we they seized our phones, everything, and we went in. They just kept us. No, we were not told why we were picked up, what were we doing, we had our accreditation as observers. But then what was funny was, after a while, someone came and said, who among you here send message? Apparently, some of our partners in Abuja had gone on TV and are talking, they have arrested and detained this in just, these are their names, they should release them. So like, I thought we collected your phone. Then they searched us. Who has? They said, no, you collected all our phones. But what happened was, you know, we know just anticipation. That message was sent. And that was how they released us. Because they're like, oh, these people, we want to come and cause trouble for us. Oh yeah, carry your phones and go. You know, and then they let us go. And that's what happens when you're not working in silos, that building community, because most times you need someone else to amplify your voice out there and to protect you better. But then building community around people that actually speak up. I think in one of the episodes, one of the guests actually said that if you have nothing to say, then do not shut down people speaking up. Yeah. Don't criticize those speaking up. If you don't want to speak up, fine. Sit down. No one says you must speak about an issue. But when people are speaking up about an issue or moving for to demand an accountability, if you have nothing to say, don't criticize and don't question. Don't say, oh, they've received money from this person. If you think they got, then you can start your own protest. Your own
movement, yeah.
And your own movement. But just also knowing that part of that building community is, even in our society, we should support people that are brave enough to speak up. And if you have nothing to say, just shut up. Scroll. Pass. You don't need to drop a comment. No, I mean, because these days it's just frustrating. You go online, you see someone putting forward a legitimate claim, and what you have is just another set of humans criticizing everything about, and maybe there's a past. Let's say one time this person took a picture with a political leader. One time,
and they just bring
it up.
Yeah,
and then so it undermines the issue.
Yeah.
And then we focus on the personality. And that is why most times we struggle to achieve results. It's not because we don't know the problems. It's because we're not yet building across board, and we're not yet supporting each other. Quincy, why do you have a question?
I think I have one question. Can movement convert mobilization into long-term system and institutional change?
Well, so that question is probably the biggest gap we get between movements and real change in society. And to be fair, I've listened to a lot of people talk about this, and they almost delegitimize the significance of a movement because the movement did not lead to significant change. And I think I have a problem with that. And it speaks to the point that Cynthia has made. We've set a parameter for success for movements that is impractical. The expectation that every movement will lead to some serious policy, legal, or other change is impractical. The ideal situation would be that movements lead to these changes. But certain movements are just signaling. Certain movements are just a measure for people to express grievance. And it's almost therapeutic. There are people who were part of NSAS whose view on this country, young people, have changed forever. Because they were part of that moment. And they believed. And they saw something. Even for our generation as millennials, in all my life, I've never believed that the young people across Nigeria would come together and speak in one voice the way NSAS happened. And it changed my view of Nigeria's youth forever. And so, yes, there are ways movements can translate into change. And we can talk about that for a full podcast. And there are some of the things we've spoken about already. Having clear-cut strategy, having some bits of leadership, having a community to support you, and seeing through, following through after the street part of everything has ended is great. But I do want to disabuse the fact that because a movement did not lead to this change, it was a failure. You know, when the Constitution gave you rights of freedom of expression or freedom of movement, it didn't say freedom of expression to change Nigeria's military. It didn't say freedom of movement to trek to Abuja to change the president. It just gave you those inherent rights. And your ability to express those inherent rights are inherent in your humanity as a person. The fact that you can just express those freedoms in itself underpins the fact that you live in a democratic society. Because those who don't can't express those rights. I do think that we have to also draw a line between people like Cynthia, who run civil society organizations, and the average young person on the street. Because when these movements happen and these young people are expressing their anger, the burden is then on the Cynthias of the world to then say, okay, this is an important issue they've raised. How can I support it to translate it? Because those young people don't know how to support it. And there are ways you can support it. It's by providing them information. It's by providing them access. It's by legitimizing their views, by amplifying their voices. It's by supporting what they are saying and things like that. But the expectation that every young person in Nungu, in Borno, in Maiduguri, that is part of a protest should now carry the burden of translating it into change. It's just impractical, isn't it? So I do think we need to draw that line. If young people are angry, let them express it in the ways that the Constitution allows them to express it. Then let the organized civil society and the organized policy leaders and the other people like us who work in the space then say, okay, this is a moment of change. Let us see how we can translate it into real change. And if the leaders of those movements are thoughtful enough, are experienced enough to actually do the translation, awesome. But if they can't, then when those protests, and in my view, for instance, with End Bad Governance and some of these protests recently, when people tell me to reflect on why they didn't succeed, I put the responsibility squarely on the organized society organizations, on the development partners, on the media, on the people who actually knows how to do this translation that didn't leverage it. Because I don't expect that the young person who is jobless, who is angry at the state, who is not trusting, should be the one to translate that change.
I mean, controversial view. Not everyone agrees with me. I always tell people that the NSAS was a success.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we need to start measuring success differently, especially when it comes to movement. It's not easy to converge and convene people to the streets. Young people turned out in their numbers in different cities. That for me was the first level of success. And whether we like it or not, NSAS was disbanded. Yes, it may have taken different forms. But the fact that there was an action taken because you turned out in numbers, young people turned out in numbers, was for me also success. And the 2023 elections became a 3-horse race, not because we were built for a 3-horse race in particular, but there was an existing agitation that made it easier for a third contender emerging to ride on that sentiment. And so you see that level of competition we saw in the last election, for me, was also the success of the NSAS. There's a lot more we can analyze on that now. And I totally agree that burden we want to put on young people to say, oh, because you did this, it must become something. For not too young to run, we get that a lot. People tell us, every time I go for meetings, say, oh, not too young to run, you did this, but you failed to achieve anything. You would have become a political party. By now, you'd have had more young people elected. We said not every movement wanted to transit to a political party. It was a social movement for an amendment to the constitution. And the idea was to create spaces for young people to participate in politics. But if we keep expecting every protest to become a new political movement that then becomes maybe a party and it then makes it difficult for people to even come. People will be like, there's too much pressure. I don't want to come in here and they tell me I failed.
And we did legitimize the effort they made already. And because we keep telling people who were part of NSAS that they were not successful. And it's very painful because people put in a lot of effort and time to take that stand against the Nigerian state. And you're telling them that because they did not lead to the disbandment of the Nigerian police force, they failed. The next time you want them to come on the street, that is the voice they have in their head that the last time they failed. And the other example you're just giving about not too young to run. So the India example I was telling you, I was just reading an article where everybody thought the Cockroach Junta party in India should now use the opportunity to go into politics and form a proper political party. And the leaders of the movement have come out to say, we don't want to be a political party. We want to be an accountability mechanism for India.
And that makes sense.
And they want to stop there. It doesn't mean it's a wrong thing, because in Hong Kong, we saw young people who led protests like a decade ago, got into parliament at 22, 23, and some of them continue to be in politics. Some have fled the country. Every movement is different. The important thing is that there is clarity on what you want to achieve when you start a movement. And in a country as very diverse as Nigeria, we have to understand, and I was in a meeting talking about this morning, that in countries like Nigeria, and it's not just Nigeria, we think about really diverse countries, Nigeria, India, and some of these countries, change is often very incremental. Because we spend so much time building consensus that before you get consensus on one issue and shift it, other countries would have done it in 1 year. You probably need 10 years. 10 years. To build it. And then you get it, you tick it off, you move on to the next issue. And we need to recognize the incremental changes that we are making as a society, and the contribution that protest and activism and society make to that need to be recognized, not just because they didn't succeed the first time they tried. Yeah.
So final question, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
And it's about acting together. Do you think we're building active solidarity, especially with respect to our current realities, or are we losing that bond that enables us act better together?
I do think that on questions like this, we need to have a balanced perspective on it. Because if we say we just need to act better as a community, then you're not giving proper representation to the people already acting as a community.
Okay.
And because the community is not happening around you, doesn't mean that the community is not happening somewhere else.
True.
So you can't let your personal experience be the representation of your perception of an issue. I do think that everybody in their space should try to do better, to be part of, the good example I'd want to give is with elections. In Nigeria, I see young people, and maybe obviously in the space I work in, Cynthia, you do as well. We always find this relaxation until close to the next general election. This INEC now says it's time to register to vote. Then we now mobilize young people, go and register. And then they register, and then we say, go and vote. And then they vote. And then the result is not good. Everybody just goes home. And we wait for 3 years. And then INEC says, voter registration has opened again. Oh yeah,
we're back
go and register. Give us funding. We want to go and get people to register. But in the societies where young people have actually made a difference, they go through the whole democratic circle.
True.
So you register, then you mobilize. You finish mobilizing, then you vote. Once you finish voting, then you drive accountability. When you do the accountability, you shape the issues that then determines the next registration circle. And I think the one thing I would say for us to build better communities, for people to follow through in the full circle of governance. Because let's be honest, Nigeria's elections have a lot of challenges, as does Kenya, as Ghana. Like, everybody wants to make their elections work better. We cannot let these elections or particular moments of activism determine what young people are contributing to democracy. There was this stat I saw, I'm just remembering it now, where we were talking about the fact that about 70% of Africa's youth are below 30 years old. And we're going to make an even higher percentage in a few years' time.
Yes, actually.
But then beneath that stat was the fact that they said young people between the age of 18 to 35, I want to get this correctly, are 12% less likely to attend council meetings. They are 18% less likely to contact their leaders on any platform to demand accountability. So we see young people, even when they engage in activism, they tail off.
Yeah.
The change actually happens in the case of, for instance, let's say Nigeria, with President Tinubu, for instance. The real thing that will determine what he's done as a president are the 3 budgets he has presented between 2023 and 2026.
Yes.
How many of us have gone through this budget to say, what have we allocated for young people? And this time around, unlike when we were younger, you don't need to go and join a protest to say, you've done this thing wrong. You just go on social media and you talk about it. And through that congregation of voices, you can then influence change. So the main things I'd say is, be very clear on what you want to achieve. Have perspective on the good stuff happening around movements across the continent in your country, not just because it's not happening with you, other people are not doing it. Because when you do that, you're delegitimizing their engagement. And even as important as anything else, you have to follow through. Democracy and governance happens every day in our lives. The fact that you limit it to a particular protest or a particular election, you are actually cheating yourself. You have to be engaged for as long as possible. And don't take the pressure that engagement must be one big change. The little thing you say, the little push you make, the one protest you do, the next day you have to go to work, is fine. But it is these little contributions that pile up, not just to provide the outcomes you need, but to sustain the democratic societies that we all live in.
Wow. Thank you. When you were talking, I was just nodding, because this is what we need to put this in 1 minute. Just capture this message and put it out there for the world to hear. And it's been interesting having this conversation with you. And that's because as we observe how situations begin to evolve, we want to consciously ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind, especially for the younger people, that they have the requisite tools to engage and get the work done. And so the message to everyone watching is, democracy, our civic space, or democracy does not decline only because the government or those in power have tools to undermine it. It also declines when citizens become very comfortable with that and refuse to take action. Our civic space does not only shrink when our lawmakers introduce legislations or policies to limit our rights. It also shrinks when we decide not to act or even act together, or when we decide not to amplify the issues that matters in and out of election season. And so the question for everyone watching is, what is that one thing, one action you think you can take in your respective communities to amplify the issues that matter to the people in your community and to hold your government accountable? What is that one issue? Let us know in the comment section. Mention your country and community, and then that one issue you want to work on. It's been an interesting conversation so far. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthew Ayibakoro, for...
You're going to doctor me now. No,
yes. Oh, I wanted to say barrister, but we want not to call not to use the term barrister.
We're going to meet them in court about
We're going to meet them in court about that. But
struggled for that title. You can't just take it away.
I was telling someone, 5-year law school, 5-year law program, 1 year law school. And then the law school itself was torture. It was torture. Most of us survived.
And then you now say, no, don't use it.
And then they say, no, don't recall. Mess of people, that's all they live for.
I mean, I don't care about the name, but I think on behalf of all lawyers, just give them that title. It's really hard in Nigeria.
It's really hard. I know. I told someone I've never used barrister before, but because of this legislation, I want to add it to my name.
We should.
Because I think in this point, we want to say no. What is it? Are you a lawyer? Do you know how hard it is to? You know how much it is to go through law school? It's a very expensive course.
We're going to another podcast.
We're going to another podcast.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Dr. Matthew, for being part of us in this conversation. Quincy, why? Over to you.
Thanks to you who watch and listen to us at the Unamplified Podcast. We love you all. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share, and follow us on all social media handles at the Unamplified Podcast. And shout out to those behind the cameras. You guys rock. And we draw the curtains here.
When you're on,
You're amplified. Cheers to Africa.
Cheers to Africa.